Welcome to the 10th video of the Blender 2.8 Beginners Tutorial series. In this video we will create the material for the fabric and also the frayed edges. Then we will create a leaf for the apple using an image with a transparent alpha channel. And at the end we will duplicate and cut the apple in half and apply a new texture to the cutted plane. As always, you can find the timestamps in the video description below. And if you want to follow along, sign up to our resource section free of charge, where you can download all the project files, textures and videos for this course and our handy Blender 2.8 shortcut PDF. You can find the link down below in the video description. Hi everyone, Zach here for cgboost.com and let's get started. Now let's texture the fabric over here. I'm in the shading workspace, and now down here in the material tab I can add a new material. But actually you don't always have to switch to the material tab over here. When you have the shader editor enabled, you can also add a new material by simply clicking over here. And you can see this will also create the new material over here in the material tab. Let's call it fabric, and for this fabric object I have prepared two textures. I have one fabric texture for the color, which I drag and drop into Blender, and one which is called fabric normal. This is a normal map. A normal map is something similar like a bump map. A bump map just consists out of grayscale values which defines up and down and is mostly used for very small and tiny details. A normal map works similar. With different colors we define the height, but a normal map in most cases has a much better and stronger result. Also, these two textures are seamless, similar as the wooden texture we used for the wooden blanks. And I generated both textures with a paid tool called Pixblend, which generates seamless textures and also, for example, the normal map from a single image. Pixblend is just one of many tools which can do that. So first of all, let's use the color, the fabric texture, and simply connect this with the base color of the principled shader. And as you can see, immediately we see the texture on the object. And that's because if we quickly switch over to UV editing, here we have a UV map already, because every basic shape you add to your scene has a default UV map already, and since we used a simple plane as foundation here, we still have the UV map. Let's hit the middle mouse button, hold and move this to the side, and let's enable the look dev mode over here. And let's click on this button to hide all the overlays here so that we only see what will be in the final rendered image. Now, I think the fabric texture is still too big. What we can do over here in the UV editor, let's hit A to select everything. Let's press S for scaling and simply scale this up. And you can see as soon as I scale this up, the texture on the model will be scaled down because we basically cover more space. So, and you might wonder why we can see a texture although the UV map is bigger than the square. And that's because if we switch back to shading, this texture is set to repeat. As soon as the UV map is moving over the frame, the same texture will be used again, and since this texture is seamless, we don't see any seams on the surface here. So now let's use the normal map. The normal map works similar as the bump map, but we have to use a normal map node instead. So let's hit Shift A, go to Vector and add a normal map node. Put it in between the texture and the principled shader. Then let's connect the color output with the color input and the normal output with the normal input of the principled shader. To better see the result over here, let's temporarily disconnect the color. The result looks a bit weird, as you can see, and that's because we have to change one setting on the texture. Here behind color space, we have to change the input color space to non-color. So as far as I understand, we don't use the actual color information here for the normal map, and that's why we have to change this. Then on the normal map, we can also change the strength if we like, but in this case, I think the strength of 1 is fine. Then let's plug in the color once again, and now you can see this looks quite good already. Let's create a simple roughness map by adding again a converter color ramp. Use the color of the texture, plug this into the roughness. And here actually we want to have a quite rough material. So let's select the black handle here and change the color to a brighter one. And let's add a bit more bright values to the whole map so that we just have a very subtle reflection on the material. And now on the texture, there's still one little thing I want to add, because when I zoom in here, you can see we have this little holes in between those chords, and I want to have them to be transparent so that we can see the bowl through the cloth here. And that we can do by creating a very simple alpha channel. So for that, hit Shift A, add a simple color ramp, connect this with the color of the texture, and to better show you what's going on here, let's quickly add a shader, emission node, and connect this with the surface output and the color with the color. An emission node is basically a node which kind of emits light, but it also has the effect that no light and shadow information will have an effect on this. So we basically just see the plain texture on here. So it's a great and simple way to preview the texture here. So now you can see the chords are relatively bright, but the holes in between are relatively dark. And if I increase the dark values here and decrease the white values, we have a nice contrasty image. And down here on the principal node, we have the alpha information. And again, similar as for the roughness value here, 0 means black and 1 means white. And if I now simply plug this into the alpha channel, remove the emission node, and again connect the principal shader with the surface of the material output node, then everything is right, but we can't see the transparency here. And that's why we have to enable an option for the real-time viewport here. In the material settings down here, we find the settings panel, and let's change the blend mode to all for clip, and the same also for the shadow. And now, as soon as we play around here, you can see how this is affecting the transparency. So basically all the black areas of this alpha mask will be cut out and all the white areas will stay visible. And in this way we can add this simple yet very nice looking transparent holes. So the whole thing looks way more complex as the mesh is. Alright, now let's go over to the layout. You can see the edges of this fabric are very straight and clean and perfect. But in real life, this would look frayed, and that's why we quickly adjust the mesh over here. First of all, let's switch over to the solid viewport shading, which makes the editing a little bit easier. Then let's hit Tab to switch to edit mode. Make sure that the face selection is enabled. Left click somewhere to deselect everything. Then hold down Alt and click on one of those lines here to select the loop. With Shift Alt, left click here to select this loop. Shift Alt this one here, and Shift Alt this one here. Now we have basically a whole loop around the cloth. Now let's hit Ctrl and plus on the numpad to increase the selection. If you don't have a numpad, simply go to Select, select More or Less and click on More. Now right click and click on Subdivide. We want to add a higher resolution to this area, and let's increase the number of cuts to 3. Then I change the fractal value. Let's try 2. This adds this random transformation here to this area. If you want to use this randomize tool without subdividing your mesh, you can also quickly select an area, left click and hold on the smooth tool down here and click on randomize, and then left click and hold and move your mouse left and right to add this randomize effect. So now the edges are uneven and so on, but still they're relatively straight. So what I do now, I use the circle select tool, but in this case I don't activate it over here. I press C to enable this. And the cool thing is when I use the shortcut, I can scroll the mouse wheel to change the radius, which is not possible if you are using the tool over here. The problem with the shortcut, however, is that I now can't change the view. You always have to hit right click or escape to disable the tool to move your view. So what I do now, I press C and simply select some of the outer areas here. So it should be relatively uneven, something like this. And now I go around the whole cloth, simply select a few areas and then right click, change your view, press C again and go on. Okay, now I've selected all the stuff around here. Just make sure that you don't have some not selected faces here because then we have some floating elements here. So make sure that this is selected. And what I could do, I could simply delete all this stuff here, but I like to model it in a way that it is non-destructive, more or less. I mean, we already destroyed the mesh here, but I want to be able to change this later on. So what I do, I click on this Object Data tab, open up the vertex groups, add a new vertex group. Let's call this height and click on Assign. Basically, if I choose the vertex selection over here, we have selected a lot of vertices here. And by adding a new group and then hitting Assign, I add all these vertices to this vertex group. So they are now grouped in here. And the cool thing is, if I deselect everything with those groups, I can select and deselect. So I can basically store the selection. I can add more vertex groups if I like, and I can also remove them. And we can also use them for modifiers. So let's tap back to object mode. Go to the modifiers. We have a subsurf modifier over here. Let's add a mask modifier. And this allows us to hide vertex groups. So what I do, I simply click in here under vertex group and choose the hide vertex group we have created. And as you can see, this now only shows the stuff which we have selected. And if I click this button, this will be inverted, as you can see. So now if I zoom in here, this is still too edgy for my taste. So I click on this little arrow to move the mask modifier up. So this one will be calculated first. And after this, we have the subsurf modifier, and then this will be smoothed a bit. If I now go back to the look dev mode, you can see how this looks like. Let's quickly disable all the overlays. And in this way, this looks way more realistic. Certainly it's not perfect, but as a quick result, this works much better than just having a straight line here, in my opinion. Let's re-enable all the overlays and let's get back to the shading workspace. So now I want to add a simple leaf to the apple here to make it look a little bit more interesting. And for that, again, I prepared a texture with an alpha channel. What this means, I will show you in a second. First of all, let's hold down Shift and right click here somewhere on the apple to place the 3D cursor here. Then let's hit Shift A to add a simple plane. This is now way too big, so let's press S to scale it down. Press G, Z and move it up just a bit. So now let's add a new material here. Let's call it leaf. And then let's again drag and drop the leaf image over here. So this image was basically a simple photograph of an apple tree leaf. And then in Photoshop, I removed the background and exported this as PNG with alpha channel. And the alpha channel is basically the transparent background. You can see here we have the color output, which is certainly the color of the leaf. And we also have the alpha output. If I connect this, you can see this is a simple black and white image. So it's basically the same thing we used for the fabric over here to create this little transparent holes here. But for the fabric, we had to generate this using a color ramp. And here we can simply use the predefined alpha channel. So all we need to do right now, connect the alpha channel to the alpha down here. And the color with the base color. And again, to make this work, we have to go to the material settings and set the blend mode to alpha clip in this case to make this look nice. So now the aspect ratio of this plane is not correct for the leaf. So let's press N. So, and if I right click on this image here, go to the properties, details, you can see that we have a resolution of 1354 by 3160. That means now just to have this aspect ratio, go to dimensions, change the X value to 13.54 and the Y to 31.60. So now it's way too big certainly, but it has the right aspect ratio. Let's scale it down, something like this. Let's hit Ctrl A and apply the scale. Now this is back at 111. Let's press N to hide this. And now let's create a simple roughness map and a bump map. So hit Shift A, converter, add a color ramp. Use the color and connect this with the roughness. When you create a material, certainly the best way to figure out how a material looks like is to have the real world object in your hand and see how this interacts with the light. As I can remember, this was relatively rough, so I probably would add a little bit more roughness here and just add a bit of roughness to the dark areas as well. And I think we can also add a relatively strong bump map here. So let's connect this with the color and this with the normal. And then let's see how this works. You can see that this vein kind of things are lifted up here. So what I would do, I would invert the bump map here so that this is pushed inwards and the rest outwards. And I think strength of 0.1 should probably do the job here. Yeah, again, we can change this later on if this doesn't fit correctly. So this is our very simple leaf material for now. Now let's change the shape of the leaf. Certainly this is not just this very flat and straight thing. So let's up here hit Control Space to go into full screen mode. Press T for opening up the tools and tap into edit mode. Now let's use the loop cuts, Control R, and add a bunch of cuts here. Left click to confirm and right click or escape to cancel the slide mode. Now let's enable the proportional editing, which we used to create this hole here inside of the apple. So I just select the inner part here, press G, move it upwards and scroll my mouse wheel. And then I can create this nice bending here, since everything around the selection will also be moved. Something like this. Now let's use the knife tool over here. In order to start this, we can also simply press K. Now let's click in here and simply draw a line along the center of this leaf. To confirm this, press Enter. Then let's hold down Control and deselect this one here. Press G, Z, move it down just a bit. And then let's add 2 loop cuts over here by pressing Control R. And with Shift Alt, I also select this loop over here, move it down a bit. And now let's just organically adjust this a bit further. Something like that. Now let's tap back to object mode, right click and click on Shade Smooth. And let's press Control Space again to get back. And let's simply add a subsurf modifier to make this look round and smooth. Let's call the object leaf, and now let's put it here into the apple. So now, similar as for the knife here, when I move the apple, the leaf stays where it is. So let's select this, then with Shift the apple, right click, click on Parent and click on Object. So we parented this leaf over here, you can see it, to the apple. So when I move the apple, the leaf follows around. Don't forget to save your blend file. So and now I want to create the last asset for this scene here, which is a cut apple. Certainly we won't create a new apple from scratch, we just use what we have here. Let's quickly go over to the layout and have a look at the apple. And there's one thing I do recommend when you are creating a 3D scene. When you reached a certain point, I would show the scene to a friend or to another 3D artist and ask him for their opinion. This can really help you to pinpoint some things in your scene which doesn't look so nice. And my brother, for example, was looking at the final scene of this project at the first time. And the first thing he noticed was that the apple looks kind of off, so it doesn't have like the perfect apple shape. And if this is something which pops into the eyes of someone else immediately, this is probably something you have to change, because other people would also notice this. So I looked at the shape of an apple again, and then I realized what he means. So first of all, let's tap into edit mode, loop select this one here. I still have proportional editing enabled. Press G and Z to move it up. Let's bring this one here a bit closer. We have to edit this very carefully, because if we do it too much, we stretch the texture too much, because it's not recommended to drastically change the shape of an object after UV unwrapping and texturing. So let's also select the inner part here, scale it way in here, add another loop, scale it to the inside and a bit upwards. And if we hide the wooden floor here, let's also do a similar thing down here. Let's select this, maybe add another loop. And also make the lower part a bit smaller. So For now, tap out of edit mode. I think this looks at least a bit better. Certainly we have to adjust the position of the leaf once again. Yeah, something like this. Let's unhide the wooden floor. And now let's select the apple without the leaf, Shift and D, press X to lock this along the X-axis. And now let's create the apple which is cut in half. Tap to edit mode. First of all, deselect everything. Move your mouse above the stem here, press L and X and click on vertices to delete this completely. Then by holding down Alt, left click on here and then with Shift Alt, left click over here to select these two loops. You can also go to the solid viewport shading to see this better and maybe enable the edge selection. And now let's use the region tool, but we don't have to click on this tool. Let's simply press V to access the tool and then you can see this selected edge will be split. Now let's deselect everything. Let's press L on one side of the apple, right click, go to separate and click on selection. You can also access this menu by pressing P. So now as you can see, I can edit this further. I have to tap back to object mode and now we have two apples here. Let's simply call this apple cut 1 and apple cut 2. Let's press G, X, move this to the side and maybe rotate this along the Y-axis 90 degrees. So simply type in 90 on your keyboard. Here as well, R, Y, 90 negative in this case, so I simply press the minus on the numpad to invert this, enter, and let's move both up a bit. So certainly we just have this open holes here, so let's select both and press tab for entering edit mode. Here in Blender we can also enter the edit mode of multiple selected objects. Let's use the vertex selection, select the whole loop here, and we can on the one hand press F to fill the whole thing. But then we just get a big n-gon, that means a face with more than 4 vertices. And you can see that the surface then looks kind of weird. And that's why I use a nice little tool. Let's go to face and click on grid fill. That will fill the open areas with quads. That means faces with 4 vertices. Let's change the span to 6 over here and let's offset this a bit. This looks pretty nice, but you can see that the edge here is pretty roundish. So what I do, I press I, this stands for inset faces, and then create a little inset here. And let's go to the look dev mode. Over here, I add a new loop cut, Control R, places, and move this up. When I move this up, you can see down here, correct UVs is enabled. That means we won't stretch the UV map around. If I disable this, you can see that the texture will get stretched. So make sure that correct UVs is enabled. Let's do the same thing over here so that we have a relatively straight cutting edge over here. So now let's do the same thing quickly over here. Alt left click, select the whole outer loop, faces, grid fill, set to 6 and change the span until it looks right. Press I to add a small inset face and with Control R add a loop cut over here and also to the other side. So and now everything that is missing is basically a texture for this area up here. So let's tap back to object mode, just select one of them. Then let's go to the shading workspace. And right now, if I go to the material tab, we just have this one apple material. But right now I don't want to hand paint this as we did for the apple. I just want to quickly use a pre-made texture for this. So what I do, I click on the plus symbol to add a new empty material slot. Click to the library symbol and add the apple material. This I want to use as foundation so I don't have to create the whole material again. Then I click on this button to duplicate the material. So I have the apple material as foundation. Let's call this apple cut. And let's remove the apple texture here. Because again, I have prepared a simple apple cut texture. Let's put it in here. Let's reconnect this. And now we have to define that the second material only should show up in this area here. So let's hit tab to enter edit mode, use the face selection, and let's simply press C for the circle select tool and select carefully this area here. Right click to disable the circle select tool. And now I want to add the second material to this area. And this I can do by selecting this up here and then hitting the assign button. Now you can see we have this edge over here from the apple texture, which is caused by the subsurf modifier. So if I disable this, you can see this tiny edge here will be stretched longer using the subsurf modifier. So I have to increase the selection, Control and plus on the numpad. Then let's go back to the material and click on assign again. Now this tiny edge will also be assigned to the second material. But now if I tap back to object mode, this still don't look like an apple. And that's why we have to adjust the UV map. But before I adjust the UV map, let's quickly do the same thing for the second half of the apple. Let's click the plus symbol. And here I want to use the same material as I used here. So I don't create a new one. I simply pick the apple cut from the library. Tap to edit mode. Let's select the whole area here. And with Control plus, I grow the selection and then hit assign. So now we have defined that this material is only showing up in this area. Now let's go over to UV editing, re-enable all the overlays. And you can see the old UV map looks kind of weird because it was, I don't know, using maybe the UV map from the original Apple somehow. So what we have to do, let's press numpad 7 to show this from above. Let's disable proportional editing just in case. Then let's click on UV and click not on unwrap, but on project from view. So basically the selected faces from our view will be reprojected over here in the UV editor. Let's press A to select everything. Let's rotate this, move it over here and simply scale it up. It doesn't have to match perfectly over here, so just that this area is covered. Then let's go to the other half. Tap to edit mode, and instead of clicking here, you can also press U and then click on project from view. Over here, let's hit A to select everything, scale this up. Let's rotate this and fit this roughly here as well. So now let's go back to shading. Now we have this cutted apple. Now let's check the material if this fits. So apple cut is selected. I want to have this a bit more glossy because when you cut an apple, there's a lot of apple juice coming out. So let's add more glossiness. Let's put the white values over here and let's darken the dark values. And let's move this over to this side so that the whole thing gets more glossy. Or we just select the white handle here and reduce the brightness so we get more dark values, so that this is very glossy. And then let's increase the strength of the bump map. I think something like this. And since both apples are using the exact same material, just different spots on the texture, all the changes I do here will automatically adjust over here on this apple. And now we have a full apple and a cut apple. So now let's get back to layout. And now we have all the assets we need for assembling the final scene. Don't forget to save. Yeah guys, now you know how to use transparency in your materials, which can really add more details to the object than the actual mesh has. Also, you learned how to apply multiple materials to one object, which can also be useful in many different cases. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe to this channel and ring the bell underneath this video if you want to get notified for future videos. If you want to extend your 3D knowledge and support our YouTube channel here, check out our Blender 2.8 Launchpad course. This course will give you a strong foundation into Blender 2.8 while creating a full animated scene from scratch. If you're not sure if this course is something for you, you can check a bunch of lessons for free. Go to the product page, link in the video description below, scroll down to the free preview section and check the free videos. Thanks a lot for watching guys. Now check the next video where we will create the water drops on the apples using a particle system. I will see you there. Goodbye.